Is it Brianna here? Brianna? Michelle Palma? Anisha Louis? Or Leo? No? Hi. Welcome. So, we're one of the few states that really does it face-to-face with our pharmacy managers. And there's a reason why we do this. It's because there's a reason why you're called the pharmacy manager and not just a staff manager. You're a pharmacy manager because of responsibilities. The pharmacist manager is responsible for the pharmacy department. Sometimes the pharmacy that you're responsible for is the whole building, like an independent pharmacy like Rick had, like the ones I had. You're in charge of the whole pharmacy because that's the licensed pharmacy footprint. Sometimes in a chain or a grocery store or a big box, your kingdom is that cage and behind it, where that pharmacy department is. So understand that you are responsible for that area. I can't possibly go over all the tutorials that a manager really needs to know, so we have a really convenient website set up at ct.gov/Commission of Pharmacy /managers tutorial. So it starts with ct.gov, and Heather will tell you. It's slash what?
Oh, that's a good idea.
What?
She said put it right at the back of your name tag so you can just click out and read it.
So you get
It's
the big bucks.
ct.gov/TC.
So you're attesting to me that you will go on their website. It's really a great website because it talks about the laws. It talks about all the black and white two-dimensional rules and regulations that you need to follow as a pharmacist manager. But I'm going to touch on some of the stuff that we see, both good and bad. So where we see issues, because we only want to see you during good times, never during bad times. But where we see issues is tech ratios. What's the correct tech ratios?
2-1.
Unless one's
licensed.
then it's 3-1. I can assure you, you will have a cashier or a clerk or whatever you'd like to name them. It's not a pharmacist tech or registered, but an agent's going to walk in that day and that person's going to be counting tablets because you were so busy you needed to call somebody from the front. And that's when they walk in. Trust me, I can assure you, they know about the flipping of the name tags. They know that one side says clerk, the other side says tech at times. They understand that. Watch your tech ratios. If your tech ratios, if you can't get the job done with public safety in mind because you're so busy, that's where you have to say to yourself, is this work environment causing me to bring public safety at risk? And if it is, that's when you have to have a conversation with your supervisor, with the owner of the independent pharmacy, with your manager, whoever you report to. That's when you have to bring that up. Because trust me, when you get called in for a problem, they're going to ask you, well, you didn't bring it up. Because you can't use the excuse, I was too busy, that's why I made a mistake. So understand your work environment. If the ratios aren't working for you, you really have to speak up. Expired licenses. As the pharmacist manager, make sure all your staff pharmacist licenses are current. Make sure all your technician licenses are current. I tell a story right here in the state of Connecticut. It happened years back, but there was a pharmacist that was filling prescriptions and no problem. Then unfortunately, this particular pharmacist made a med error. And the error came to the commission, and sure enough, this pharmacist hadn't had a license in over 2 years. But they were still working because they didn't realize that, oh, I have to renew my license every year. So now they had an error, they weren't licensed. What do you think all the insurance companies did? They recruited every penny back to when their license was active because they were illegally filled. It cost that particular pharmacy tens of thousands of dollars just because no one decided to check whether to see whether or not that pharmacist was licensed or not. Technicians are even more important because a tech won't tell you that they haven't renewed. They get the updates 60 and 90 days ahead of time to renew. Well, it's up to you to make sure that they are renewing those licenses. One of the things that we see a lot out there is updating the tech manuals. The technician manuals need to be updated at least once a month. So I know they sit dusty in a corner up there. I own pharmacies, I know they're sitting there. But put it in a tickler file, put it into a calendar, update tech manuals, update my tech, because when an agent comes in, that's one of the things that seems to come up on most reports that the technician manuals haven't been updated. Power of attorneys for Schedule II drugs and CSAUs. Make sure your power of attorneys are up to date. Every once in a while they come out and do a little sting, the feds do. So look at your power of attorneys, make sure that they're up to date, make sure the proper people are credentialed for those power of attorneys. No one uses DEA 222 forms anymore, so it's CSAUs. So one of the things that we don't like to talk about, but we have to, is diversion of drug. It's amazing how a pharmacist manager can play a major role in avoiding diversion. And it could be simple little things. For example, the same person that puts the order in CSAUs is not the same person that checks the order. It's something that we do in our facility. Because the person that's putting it in may put a couple in for themselves, then when they're checking it in, they may take those with them. So keep those two functions separate. It seems to work. Understand that the pharmacist manager in the state of Connecticut has direct supervision over their technicians. Know where your techs are, understand where they are, understand what they're doing. You can't say, well, I didn't see them, because our rules and regulations say that you will keep an eye on them and that you have to have direct supervision on them. Be aware what's being diverted out there. One of the big diversion, everyone knows Oxycontin, right? Everyone knows oxycodone's $1 a milligram on the street. Everyone knows that. But there's some other ones out there that aren't so familiar. You know what the big one is right now? Phenergan with codeine. Right? Who would think? $3 or $4 for a pint, sells for over $100 on the street. And tramadol is diverted like crazy out there. Carespirol, so the old Soma, it gets diverted out there. So understand, know your surroundings, know what drugs are being diverted, and pay close attention to those drugs. In the middle of the summer, if you're going through Phenergan with codeine, to stop a cough, and you're going through 6 pints in June, you got to say to yourself, what the heck is going on, right? Robotics, another area that's an issue. Robots sometimes overcount. There's been cases in the state where thousands, tens of thousands of tablets are missing, and the excuse is that the robot is overcounting. Well, do you think the department cares that the robot's overcounting? Right? So understand, if you have robotics in place, know that you can adjust those apertures to make sure that the tablets are being counted correctly. Make sure that the indicators are on, because I have Script Pro in my pharmacies, and if it overcounts, it tells me. I think I overcounted it, and it screams. Well, it screams a lot sometimes, so a lot of people turn that off. So you don't realize how many times you may be dispensing something. If you have a scheduled drug in the robot, which is fine to do, except twos, right? It may be overcounting that every day for years. The next thing you know, you're off tens of thousands of tablets, and it happens. Just something to be aware of. Errors. Nobody likes to talk about errors. They happen. We're human beings, and they happen. You try to set up processes that catch them, but when an error happens, do not sweep it under the rug. Be very transparent, fill out that paperwork, because I can assure you it won't happen next week or the week after. 6 months down the road, someone's going to show up and is going to want to talk about that error. Self-report if it's an error. Make sure you follow up with physicians, and write up those reports, because 6 months or a year down the road, it's that piece of paper that's going to refresh your memory, because it's going to be your word against a patient's word. You want to make sure you have documentation there that describe the error and what took place. Do not sweep it under the rug. Manager changes. We had an issue recently where a manager, there was an issue at a pharmacy. We went to that manager, and guess what? That manager had left months and months ago and was already a manager someplace else. Well, they didn't report it. So whose responsibility is what took place at that old pharmacy? So make sure that if you do leave and go to another place of employment, make sure that you register, you let Heather know, this is where I'm working now, and I'm a manager, etc. You don't want to be the manager on a license that you're no longer responsible for, because only bad things can happen from that. And the last thing I'll talk about, and I guess I'll talk about Medwatch since Commissioner Aguante's not here, but there's a couple things that I try to instill in my pharmacist is professionalism. It's an intangible. The way you answer a phone, the way you speak to a patient, the way you handle stress. Be professional about it. do no harm. If you think do no harm your whole life, you'll never appear before this board in a negative way, only at Christmas parties, right? So think of do no harm, be professional, the way you act, the way you carry yourself around your peers, and remember that company policy doesn't override state policy. A company may ask you to do something, but if it's against state policy, we really don't care what the company asks you to do. So if you feel uncomfortable with something, you need to bring it up. Very, very important. We all understand workplace environment's really tough these days. It really is. But if you don't speak up, it's never going to get any better. Okay? Now, typically, Commissioner Anguante speaks to you about the Medwatch program, so I'll talk about it. Is everybody familiar with the Medwatch program? Really important to get that app, get it on your phone, get it on your computer. It really works. It updates you on shortages, on issues with certain pipeline of drugs. Long story, years ago, we received, date myself, with Prozac, and the bottle was labeled wrong. There was 40 milligrams in there rather than the 20 milligrams. And we caught it, we reported it to Medwatch, and sure enough, we were the first to report it, and it was all over the country a few days later that there was an issue with that lot number. So use the Medwatch program to your advantage. It's free, and it really gives you good updates. Do the commissioners have anything else? Back to work. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Okay. CDS is back. Miscellaneous matters. Front and center.
Appropriate enforcements this time?
Consumer value stores.
Morning, Commissioners.
How are you? So this is concerning the waivers that we waived to the next meeting, correct?
Correct.
Oh, we did clean up. I know what you did.
I know.
All right. So we don't have the list of pharmacies that this involves, but I guess that's really not a.
Well, it's the same one that I sent you the first time.
Yeah, so it's the same one. Yeah, okay. So I know the commissioners had a chance to look at this. There's some answers that have changed, obviously, on this.
Just a few.
And so if you could go over some of the answers that have changed, then I'll open up for the commissioners to ask some questions. If you could do that for us.
Yeah, so we added cash register functionality to question 1, which was the one of the asks by the commission. And just to clarify, this is the waiver for the set of stores that has the full functioning terminals that are outside the gate versus just a POS terminal. So that's why all of these is.
My language versus a dummy terminal, correct?
Yes, right, exactly. Yep. Correct. Other than that, the answers should have remained the same from previously. Nothing else has really changed except for the addition of the cash register functionality piece, and then I just did some more research on some of the questions the commission had before. Not that aren't really questions from the questionnaire, but just to follow up if you had it.
And number 2 really answers to one that I have an issue with. The actual data is stored in the pharmacy. So this doesn't cache that data.
No. So if you could access and unplug the actual computer terminal, whatever you want to call it, and took it with you, there's nothing on it. It's just a connection back to the server.
Are all these terminals or this setup basically the same in the whole list of stores, or are they different?
Do you mean in design?
In design, I guess I should cut to the chase and say, are the registers within direct eyesight of the pharmacist?
So all of everything that is on this list is in direct eyesight of the pharmacist. So, and I'm not sure if you've toured any of our stores.
I have.
Yeah, so I mean, most people have been in one, right? But it's not like the terminals are in the front of the store. They're right in front of the pharmacy, behind the wooden barrier. But when the gate closes at night, these terminals will be outside of that gate.
And they're shut down and the drawers aren't
Shut down, drawers are all out, correct? Yeah.
Commissioners? Deb? Kristen? Deb, you okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry, processing in my mind here. I just want to remember, did we have 2 different sets of terminals? And this was just for one of them?
Correct.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
first
One
set
set
was
of
approved
stores.
the last
So
meeting.
these are the ones where the terminal was outside, but they can't do any data entry, they can't do any of those functions, or they can do those functions.
So the first set that was approved were the terminals you're speaking of that were just tied to the POS system alone, and they can do nothing but the POS functionalities.
So
And
this is the one that has the data entry.
These have data, these terminals would have data entry capability, correct?
Okay, so just remind me, why did we need the data entry? Why couldn't we just do all dummy POS for these terminals?
Just the way the workflows are set up in the stores, these terminals were there for functionality for pre-greeting customers, patients, getting them in, getting the prescriptions typed in at that portion versus having to bring it back into the pharmacy.
Okay, and then I remember that we had a concern, well, I should say I had the concern about if the pharmacist walked away, that the terminal, someone can go in and access the terminal. So has that changed? Has that not changed?
No, so if you need to be a credentialed employee to access the terminal, so even when you look at the functionality of the terminals, even if I walked away from the terminal, you'd have to know how to use it, which they're not as intuitive as you would think. And secondly, when you, so for example, if I try to type in a patient's name, it's going to ask my credentials, and if I don't have credentials to get past that, you can't do anything with the terminal.
So your system is that, so if they walked, so let's say I was an ex-CVS employee, right? So I know how to use the system.
Yep.
And you were on the terminal and you walked away, and then I now have to go type in a name. It's gonna ask for my credentials before I can access the information.
So the CVS terminal, you have credentials you create every day to get access. So even
Right, but
yeah.
just to get, so you're already credentialed in, right? So it gives me access. So you looked up a patient, right? So
Okay.
you looked up Rick, he was in person, in line in front of me, you looked him up. Now you walked away, so you're credentialed in. If I, as a former CVS employee, went now to try to look up somebody, do I have to credential in again?
To access a different patient's profile needs individual credentialing. So to access it, we walked away from Commissioner Richard and we came to try to look at Commissioner Debbie's information, I would need to re-credential to access that patient's profile.
Gotcha, okay. That makes me feel more comfortable.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion to approve the waiver as presented?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. Don't come back.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Request for non-resident pharmacy approval. Commissioner Iguante is not here today, so the distinguished board administrator, Heather Hoynes, will be delivering the non-resident pharmacy approvals.
So me and Mary reviewed all the applications that you have listed in front of you, and there was 2 that we sent back for more information. One, we needed the Kentucky Board of Pharmacy Corrective Action Plan. So they had action on their license prior, and they did say they corrected it, but it also said that the Kentucky Board was supposed to go out to make sure that that happened, and we didn't receive that. And then the other one was they need a state pharmacy inspection. So they did submit the VIPs from NABP, but they submitted no state inspection. Typically, if they submit the VIPs, they also submit the regular state inspection on top of it. A lot of states might not do the sterile compounding aspect, but they still, typically the boards still go out and do a regular state inspection. So we're asking for that also. Any questions?
Thank you, Heather. Any questions, Commissioners? Do I have a motion to approve non-resident pharmacies minus Doc Lane's Veterinarian in Kentucky and Home RX Healthcare in Lumberton, North Carolina?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion moves. Thank you, Heather. And with that, I'll take a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes.
So moved.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very, very much. Amy, how are you?
Oh, yeah, no problem, you can always.
So you can-
Observation.
Don't
Yeah,
worry.
I was like, sit in on this.
You said that's what you said?
Yeah.
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 So I already here, I pulled her aside, and so she's on board.
Right.
Yeah, so see, who's potentially gonna work in community? Anybody? Maybe. I'm just curious. No, you got a choice, yeah, no, yeah, sounds hot, sounds hot.
You also do in November?
Say you work in management or administration, anywhere,
She did.
you know, some of the responsibilities are still the same.
So
That's
why
I just wanna make sure people.
I don't know.
Okay, because I know, I
And
never reached out to her
pharmacists
for
are
an
like,
interview.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. Tell me what
That
you
example about the person who's been licensed
Like,
2 years, can you imagine?
And it's all started, I mean, it's all started.
Yeah, he did, because he
That's why I
copied
want
me,
to find out what you
he
want.
copied me on the email.
So I did ask about, as a student,
I
when you first get
literally
licensed,
traveled
if you get licensed in Connecticut.
I mean, I just came back
So
last
licenses
and
are
right now,
renewable every
the
2
Massachusetts,
years.
like, it's
so
so
it's
terrible
very
because they
neat.
come home.
Targets.
So for you,
My son is
if you get licensed, let's just say you get licensed in June,
She's
July,
like, who are you?
August.
Go
The
ahead.
only issue with
Like
license
literally yesterday I came
through
home.
December of
and
this
he-
year, since
he didn't
next
even-
year is an
he
even
didn't say
year,
anything.
we'll have to renew next
And
year.
then for the rest of the evening, he just, Mommy, check it out.
Actually,
Like,
doing it.
I couldn't do anything, like I had to hold him all the time. And then guess what?
No, that.
Yeah, just so what, cause.
Oh, you're on?
Because we make waves and stuff, and somebody may say.
Scared me, sorry.
How y'all doing?
I only play an attorney until.
So when the students first
We
get
do.
licensed in June,
I appreciate it. Everything okay though?
Yeah,
this
yeah.
year.
And you got good ones coming?
Environment is the first one.
Couple good ones?
I just,
I don't understand the question. So like I said before, they're waiting just for a calendar year. So whenever they got licensed in that calendar year, that's the only part.
For CE.
Correct.
That's a win.
Right. Just for the calendar year. Once they renew their, once January comes along.
Every year, they'll
They
have
calendar, a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
Right, so they only get half.
And it's just call it and report it.
Not a rework, but it's.
It's the wording
For everyone to do.
that we
Yeah, no, we call them.
but it's not, our
Because I told
calendar
them,
year, there's no way to say.
I said, listen, you think it's
Got
all, this isn't.
So when, you know what I mean, like, yeah, they're not really, but they're even worse. And if you get like in January, you wait the whole year.
Yeah, so-
Here's up the one way.
Right.
I'm not here.
So yeah, you're only
Public
paid
members, what we doing?
the first year, which is.
Honestly, I don't
and
have
since
a
it's calendar
connection,
year,
connection
it's
over to
really
the
only
governor's
about
office.
I can make calls.
So.
There you go.
It kicks
There
in.
you go. I just want to have,
Assume everybody's
security
licensed
connections over
in
there.
2019.
Oh, yeah, I know, really. Well, did you get on that board?
What else is?
Big license, all mine.
You do that settling it.
Oh, wait, 2020, I mean, right, 2020, same thing in your, yeah, so 2020.
Wait 2020, then you have to relicense 2022 or 2021.
You know, if you don't know.
I think it'd be good to have.
No, that's.
I'm just kind of curious, because then I know that's at least your So this time of year, since we're working for the next half a year, this is when I have to look at my computer every day or every time I send an email, see what year it is, because I'm thinking 2020, 2021.
30 times in the last 15 minutes and you were not into the debt. Because if you don't know what that means, you couldn't possibly understand a word I said.
The only
So,
that
so, right, so
only talks
understand
about
how rule of this
the
program is
positions
back
that
up,
have
so
to be
you
filled.
know.
It's a
So
document
it
that
doesn't
lets
say
you
you
work.
can't, it just says that one has to
Or
be.
C2s.
Right.
You know, so you have, if you have that responsibility, you have to
Oh,
have a picture of your file. Just only a
One
one-page
person
document,
document.
somehow your administrative person gives you that, grants you that authority.
I went in there.
Look at
I had your.
All right, gentlemen, I've been, question for you guys.
So,
talking about how you check the
What is that?
Oh, you're
on